expectations for an unrealistic God. And what is the root of this problem? That is because God is seen as omnipotent, all powerful, with no ability to make mistakes, though mistakes are simply the most natural things to humans. We are born with the ability to make mistakes and born with the right to make mistakes because perfection cannot be attained. So, what is the trade off that we're going to see in this debate on the government bench versus opposition? Where on opposition, we are going to see where we try to attain an image of perfection, image of what is going to be absolutely ideal. On our side of the house, we see a greater good being attained where we achieve a greater degree of reality. What we need to prove to win this debate is today is that there is a net benefit derived from God being fallible, where as a guiding figure, it brings greater benefits for those who believe in him, as well as those who would want to believe in him, where we allow for greater people to achieve a greater sense of emotional security from God himself. What are the metrics of success we are going to introduce today? We will base our metric success on the ideas of the functions of religion. What are the functions of religion? Two things. First of all, to create an emotional safety net where when we are in times of trouble, where we are in times of need, we rely on God as something we can seek comfort from, where we seek guidance, where we seek emotional support. On the other side, we also see it as a guidance of behavior, right? Of course, religion is not the only thing that we see as a guidance of behavior. There are many other social norms by which we enforce our practices of behavior, but indeed, religion is one of the things the idea that we must use religion as a guidance behavior is something that religion seeks to achieve. And thus, these two things will be our metric of success today. And these will also be my points. Why on our side of the house, we achieve greater security in terms of emotional security and thus create a better safety net. And on our side of the house, we also, in terms of the second point, create better guidance behavior that is realistic, attainable, and encouraging. Now, and first of all, in terms of safety net, religion becomes a better safety net on our side of the house. Why is that? First of all, it provides a mechanization in terms of how religion itself becomes some kind of emotional security in general. As a supreme authority, God is the highest authority that we always look upon in religion, right? He is someone we are obliged to respect and adore because he is the epitome of what is good. And thus, he must have traits that we adore and respect, and because he is seen as that ideal of what is good. And when we look up to God, when people of religion look up to God, what they seek is his validation. And if God, at the top of the social pyramid, is not perfect, it reassures people that they do not have to achieve perfection, simply because it is not possible to do so. Why is this important? Because what we see in the current day and age is where people strive for perfection, where it is not possible to do so, where whatever sphere of life they are in terms of academics, in terms of who they are, and simply they try to alter themselves in order to achieve perfection, where it is compromising their most core values and identity. However, we must understand and tell people to understand that failure to achieve perfection is absolutely natural. And more importantly, mistakes are innate, right? We are born with the human nature to make mistakes simply because it is part of us. And thus, where we see that God is not perfection and we strive to attain that image of God, we achieve a greater sense of emotional security when that ideal, when that role model we look up to is also not necessarily always perfect. What are the impacts of this? Three things. First of all, it prevents the creation of a sense of inferiority. Now, on their side of the house, where God is perfect, what we feel is that God is perfect and I am not, right? And God loves me even though I make mistakes, because God is good. This is not necessarily because I deserve to be loved, even though I look up to God and base a great degree of my identity on him. On our side of the house, however, what we see is that God is good and he is indeed great, but he makes mistakes and I make mistakes. And therefore, God loves me because I am worth being loved and because I am something that he understands and empathizes with. On our side of the house, we see that there's greater positive encouragement. Second of all, more people are therefore likely to use religion as something to rely on, where we create better emotional security and a better safety net. More people are likely to seek religion as something that they can rely on during the hard times, right? And thus, we see net happiness being derived from being able to rely on religion, on an individual who we see as a role model, but is simply not perfect. Third of all, we are also more likely to rely on religion that creates a sense of emotional security, right? In addition to reliance, we see it as some kind of basis for ourselves, that ultimately we are validated as human beings and thus creating some core sense of our identity. And in all of these cases, we show you on our side of the house that we achieve greater security that cannot be achieved on their side of the house because they do not have that degree of positive encouragement. Second of all, our second point, which is the idea of guidance behavior, right? Where religion is ultimately a guidance behavior because it creates ideals on what we should and should not do. What we first of all must characterize is how humans commit wrongdoing in general and how this is relevant to behavior, right? Humans commit wrongdoings intentionally or unintentionally. Where you commit wrongs intentionally, then that's a crime or a heinous crime and a sin. However, where you commit mistakes intentionally, there is no reason, unintentionally, there is no reason for which you should be punished for that, right? Because there are some things that are minor and that we cannot control. Sometimes because we're afraid, sometimes we're guilty and whatnot. For example, sometimes we are simply afraid of consequences. Thus, we commit some small mistakes that simply do not have very large consequences. It is something we are born with and something that should be understood. And where humans understand it, so should God. So as free of authority, we're represented by God and is imperfect. It means that ultimately what happens is that we can take away the idea of guilt, right? Because people look up to God. He is the model of what is right. And priests use God as a model of behavior, right? They say that this is what upon which you should base your behavior. And thus, on their side of the house, what this creates is a great degree of stress, right? Because there's this pressure to achieve what is ultimately unattainable. However, this pressure is eliminated on our side of the house, right? You do not have to be perfect. You simply just have to be as good as possible. What are the impacts? Two things. First of all, this ultimately achieves a practical benefit of reducing religious manipulation, because where we see in the current status quo, where there are many crimes committed on the basis of religion, the justification can be, you didn't follow the instructions of God, therefore I need to punish you. For example, with the idea, with the recent rape in, with the Australian church, right? We see that this is the reason for which this actually taints religion and uses religion as a form of manipulation that has a net harm on everyone who's involved. Second of all, how we eliminate guilt and how that creates a net happiness, right? Where you're trying to improve, you're not actually trying to create guilt, where there's sometimes some obstacles. You're simply recognizing that you are going upward trend, and ultimately you shouldn't have to be guilty because you cannot be perfect, right? And in that case, what we attain is a greater degree of emotional security, as well as a better model of guidance on which we base our behavior that is positive and actually creates some kind of ultimately achievable image, kind of achievable model. And for all these reasons, because we prove to you that there's a net happiness on our side of the house on two metrics of success that are the functions of religions themselves, we sorry, what is this? Government you.
Thank you very much for this fine speech. And to start a debate on the opposition side, I invite the leader of the opposition. Here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Just a moment. Okay. I'm starting in 3, 2, 1. 2 points in my speech. The first is about more hope in the life of believers, and the second is about the comfort and determinist belief. Before that, 2 rebuttals to OG. The first, they talk about the safety net, because we seek God's validation, and therefore, if we see that he isn't perfect and he makes mistakes, we understand that we don't have to be perfect as well. But exactly based on your analysis, note that when God is perceived as in the holy text, like Bible, like the Quran, etc. God is also, exactly as OG says, perceived as the highest authority. God is also in all prayers perceived as the one we look upon to. And this is why I know I am not supposed to be God. I'm not supposed to be exactly like God because he is holy. I know that I make mistakes and God does not. It does not mean that I have to be perfect. God is just not a role model, because in all prayers and in all parts of the religion, we say explicitly how God is different from us, how God is so holy, how God is so above us that we look upon to him in every single chance. And this is why we think that this is just not likely to happen in the mind of people. Now, the second rebuttal is about ideals, and we honestly do not understand, because we think that ideals still exist in the religion, and we also think that you will reflect more over what you do and what you have done according to the religion principles, but that's more in my second point. Now, before going to the points, let's give a little bit of framing. Because we prefer a world where God is perceived as someone who makes no mistakes. That means that God is always right, that everything happened for a certain reason, and it is right until it just was supposed to be like that. What does that mean? I will talk about specifically believers and believers in God, and Muad will talk later about the people who are less religious. First, more hope in the life of believers. We're talking specifically about people who believe in God, and especially people who are poor and miserable, people that something happened to them, change their life drastically, and they need hope. They need a way to get up. they are desperate for something that will change, for a way to change your life, and for a way to live their lives better because something miserable happened to them. It can be for the long term, like someone who is very poor. It can be someone that his child just died and he needs hope in his life. There are two important things here. First, a God that is infallible is also perceived as perfect, as very strong. He's perceived as powerful because this God is sublime, and this is sublime for someone to make no mistakes, exactly because how government agrees that we are human and we do make mistakes in every interaction of our life. And because God makes no mistakes and perceived this way, this is sublime, and this means that he can foresee the future better. We think that he can do better decisions, and for all those reasons we think he's powerful. We see all those reasons of how God do better decisions, etc. This is the way we respect, and this is the way we glorify God in the holy text, like the Bible, Quran, the New Testament. And for all those reasons, we think that God is also powerful. What does that mean? That means that God know, and we think that God knows everything, and we think that this is a more solid thing to believe in, to hold on to, because he's more powerful. I feel that God has more control of my life because he's more powerful, and I have hope because there is something that actually can change my life. I can look on I can hold on to someone. The second thing here is that miserable people feel that in order for their life to change, they need real opportunity. And you feel that the only character that can actually give you this opportunity is someone that is so powerful, that is so perfect, that can change your life like this. Before I continue, CG.
What happens when you can't change your life afterwards and you get stuck? You think that God put you in this place and this is the moral thing to do? I'd like you to feel bad about yourself.
Thank you. Obviously, even in the status quo, you feel desperate, you feel bad. It does not matter if you try one more time and then get stuck, because even now you are stuck, even now you don't have hope. But we explain why in our side of the house, you do have hope in something that is so powerful, because it's conceived as so perfect. Even in the most desperate time of your life, you know that you can have it opportunity, because if there is someone perfect who's watching you, who's keeping an eye on you, you know that you will have an opportunity sometime in the future. You know that even if in the next week or in the next month it won't happen, it will happen someday, because someone who is so powerful is watching over you. Now, why is this hope so important? Because it gives the believer a feeling that he has this real opportunity, that there is someone looking on him, that watching, guarding me. I know that there is someone who is looking after what I'm doing. And I know, and obviously we know that people wouldn't think that things will just happen. They know that the God can't actively do things in their life. If I'm poor and I want to get a job, I know that God can't enroll me into a new job, but I know that I might have a chance, that I might have hope, that if I believe in him enough, if I pray enough, then maybe he will watch on me and maybe I will have a better chance. I will keep doing active things in my life, but I will do them because that I have hope that they will somehow succeed, even if now I am desperate. We think that comparatively, when you are so desperate and have no hope, you will just think, never mind what I'm going to do, nothing will change in my life. This is so hard to change this, and I don't believe in a God that is powerful enough and can watch me enough. My second point is about comfort and determinist belief. We think that a religious person does something very bad and happened to him, ask himself why. Why did it happen specifically to me? Why did my child die? Why, after believing in all those years, this is what happens? We think that when God is fallible, anything can happen to me. Like I understand it happened because God makes mistakes. Even if I believe in my God my whole life, sometimes he makes mistakes, and this is why my child died. But when God is infallible, I know it happened for some reason. I know that maybe something good will come afterwards. I know that maybe I need to reflect what I've done and look again at the principles and what I've done in my life, because maybe I need to be a better person tomorrow. We think that all people, not just people that their child died, but even just small things in their life that happen to them and are bad, will tomorrow reflect more in their life daily, because they will think, okay, if I believe in God and something bad happened to me, but it was supposed to be heaven, I need to reflect on what I've done. I need to be a better person. I need to follow the religion more specifically its principles about loving each other and being kind, etc. For all those reasons, very proud to oppose.
Thank you very much for this fine speech. And now I invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the debate for the government side. Hear, hear.
Panel, I think OO today completely mistargeted today's debate, as in their version, God is not only not perfect, but they mischaracterize our case as God being a wrongful person. Note that this distinction makes a huge lot of difference in this debate. Today, before going on to my extension, let's take down the entire of OO's case, right? First, Elo came out and told you that if God is the highest authority, it means that people are not pressurized to be God, and they know this, right? 4 responses. Firstly, note that God it's defined to be divine and holy because of the power or divine rights that God enjoys. For example, he has the power to, for example, decide who will live and who will die. He has the power to create the world. He has the power to determine all sorts of things, right? It's this sort of divine rights and powers that God has that makes people look up to God instead of all those like moral deeds, right? People think that God has these divine powers, and at the same time, it's perfect on their side of the house. We see that the fact that people adore God, not because God has all these more perfections, but it's because God has these divine rights. Precisely because God has these divine rights and he is perfect, that is why, hey, maybe I should also learn from God that to be perfect. That's to say, people respect God because God has these divine powers and rights, not because God is inherently perfect. That is to say, we're still likely to achieve people are still likely to respect God on our side of the house. It's just that the distinction that people are now coerced into following everything that God is on their side of the house, because now that they see that God is the highest authority with all rights, now that I have to follow them morally, right? Note that they also gave you the analysis that people don't have to follow exactly what God did, right? No, look at the holy text, right? The Bible explicitly tells you that Jesus forgave somebody 70 times, and each time it was like 77 times, right? So this is actually encouraging believers to do exactly the same, as in you're entitled and you're expected to forgive people infinitely, right? It is this characterization within Bible by listing out what exactly your God did in terms of moral behavior that are setting out the guidelines for you to do exactly the same. Explicit narrations of what God did as a mortal person already lays out the standard implicitly, right? But secondly, let's look at the idea that a lot of the times God are actually portrayed in mortal figures. For example, like Jesus, how he was a person. These allow people to associate with God as a person, and that's why it also indirectly sets standards about what people should be as God, right? We also gave you extra mechanisms about how there's going to be coercions from priests, that priests force you to become like the face of God. So even if there's no inherent or internal idea that you have to be God, there's also external pressure, right? But lastly, even if we think that people are not coerced to be God, even people know that, hey, I cannot be God and they're free from this pressure, we still think that there's this notion of inferiority, right? Because God is such a perfect human being and I am such a sinful person. That is why God only loves me because of empathy. I do not deserve to be loved and I am inferior. We see that this idea of inferiority and questioning whether God loves you is extremely detrimental to individual identity. But let's move into their substantive right now. Firstly, they told you you're going to give poor, miserable people more hope because they have the hope of being rescued. 2 responses. Firstly, note that the idea of hope also exists on our side of the house because God still has divine rights and divine character. So for example, he's able to determine who is going to live out of this disease, who is likely to die, right? We see that it's precisely because God has these divine powers that give people hope. We see that it's these divine powers that give people hope instead of God being morally perfect. That is to say, even if we don't have like the moral perfection, we still keep divine rights, we still give hope unto people, right? But secondly, we also see that God is unlikely to make very, very blatant mistakes, even if we think that moral is correlated. As in to say, if I am a poor person, I know that God is not morally perfect. I also make the reasonable assumption that God is not a heinous person. That is to say, even if God makes minor mistakes sometimes, he's not likely to make them it's such a big fallacy that he ignores all the sufferings in the world. That is to say, even if on their side of the house, it's true that you have morals and morals help take a big place in determining hope. We still get that kind of hope, right? But secondly, a stronger response would be, what if in the case that poor people are still entrenched in a state of poverty or suffering after they pray to God, after they have become such a good behavior? On their side of the house, this means two things: that God fails to save you, and if God is such a perfect person, from logical reasoning, I know that God will save me because he has the power to do so, and because God is such a perfect human being, he definitely knows what I've been going through. He definitely knows that he has to save me. This kind of definite assumption that God will save you under their side of the house, when they assume that God makes no mistakes, puts such a large hope of people that when your prayers don't work, then people have the notion that, hey, does it mean that God doesn't like me? That's why God doesn't save me? Is it because I am so inferior that I do not deserve any sort of like saving, that God doesn't save me? We see that this puts like questioning onto individual self-behavior when you cast no blame on God, but you force all the blame onto yourself when it's inherently not your fault that you're entrenched in poverty, hunger, and all these circumstances, right? We see that on our side of the house, we give people more of a leeway to interpret actions for emotional contentment when there's a failure for religion to save you. We also see like we also see like God actually performing tangible actions to alleviate your poverty is highly unrealistic on the current world, as we don't see how praying to God automatically means that you're alleviated out of poverty. Given this status quo, that you're highly unlikely to get 100% a guarantee from God that God will help you, we think that we get better security on our side of the house. I'll take closing.
Given your analysis that people primarily believe in God so they can get emotional safety, which emotional safety do I get when I believe in an entity which can make the same mistakes as I can make?
I think we're likely to get emotional security on our side of the house for two reasons, right? Firstly is the idea that you're not inferior, so there's an reinforcement of self-worth. But secondly, I know that God has all these divine rights and God is likely to exercise them. That's to say, I also get the sort of emotional security that God will save me. But the distinction is we give more leeway for you to interpret God's action when God actually fails to do any tangible improvement. That's the distinction where we don't actually question self-worth when we don't get tangible improvement. But lastly, onto the idea that O gave us is the idea of the comfort, right? I'm likely to reflect what I did if my child died because I think God is perfect and God will not let these like miseries happen in the first place. Two responses. We think people already have the innate to reflect, even if it's not religious, because people want to compensate and not repeat their past mistakes, and people have the curiosity to think about what they did wrong that lead to these dire circumstances. We also see that on their side of the house, we don't actually get comfort, but we get guilt because we are guilty of not complying to religious standards, which are highly impossible to comply in the first place. Now let's really move on to our extension about how we're likely to still get guidance and role model on our side of the house. On our side of the house, we think that God, although is capable of making mistakes, is still tilted towards the idea that God is trying his very best to pursue good. This attitude and general direction that people actually perform upon, that people try their best to be good, but understand that there are some times where they cannot do and be a perfect person, right? The distinction is that we normalize and that makes mistakes possible. We don't place an inferior moral burden on individuals. And we see that individuals are more likely to follow the moral behaviors in the Bible to their very best because they know it's practical to follow the behavior of God now that they know that God also has the capacity to make mistakes. We also see that on our side of the house, you're setting like more general standards even if God isn't perfect. Because of all these reasons, because we get better moral security, we get better guidance of behavior, I'm extremely proud to propose.
Thank you very much for this very fine speech, and I invite the deputy leader of the opposition to continue the case for the opposition side. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Perfect. I'm gonna start in 3, 2, 1. In my speech, I'm going to talk about the people who are a little bit more capable of like rational thinking and more of self-thinking. I'm going to explain why these people are probably going to leave religion. Why is it important to us for social changes and other impacts? Before that, few rebuttals. So the first thing is to the PY that you receive. So they tell us, look, when you are in the lower point of your life, like say a family member died, what hope are you going to have? So what we tell you is, look, if you are a religious person and you think that God can make mistakes, then you will have no hope. Why? Because today, say you lost your son or your daughter, so any child. So today, if you believe that God can make mistakes, so you can keep thinking, wait, it might happen tomorrow to my other child, or it might happen tomorrow to me, even if it's not fair. In our world, we believe that once you believe that God can make no mistakes, then you will have hope, because you will understand that it won't happen to it probably won't happen to your other child because God only made a mistake, and you won't feel so bad about it. The second thing is, look, they keep their entire case is based on the argument that God is people's model, but it's simply not true. Why? People look out at God's prophets like Muhammad or Jesus, etc. People look out for God's written Bibles and etc. But they don't look at God himself as their model. Therefore, they still look at humans as their models, humans who can make mistakes and etc. Therefore, their entire case and impacts are simply not valid. And the third thing I want to talk about is that they tell me, look, like the idea that maybe I will think maybe God hates me, but no, that in the motion it's written and said that in both sides of the house, God is perceived as benevolent, which means that in both sides of the house, you are not going to think that God hates you, because you do believe that God is good. Now let's move on to my points. Look, if we're talking about the most religious people, the Orthodox and etc., they are probably not going to change their mind tomorrow. They are probably not going to leave religion tomorrow. If we're talking about complete atheists, they are probably not going to change their mind as well, right? Because in both sides of the house, they will have the same belief that they have today. So who are the people that I want to talk in my speech? The people on the fence, the people who might believe in God and might not. Probably the characterization is people who were born to some traditional families, but do have their doubts, like maybe mixed families and etc. What do I say about these people? These people are probably intelligent and capable and of rational thinking enough to point God's mistakes in once in a time. If we believe that, if I as an intelligent person can point out something that I think that is wrong, something that I think that is a mistake, and I believe that God can make mistakes, then there is no contradiction. God still exists. He made a mistake. It's possible. But on our side of the house, we believe, wait, God can't make any mistakes. But here we look at something that we believe that is a mistake. There is a contradiction in our thinking, in our faith. This is the point in which people are probably going to leave this faith and leave this religion. For example, and it's going to be a little bit radical example, but it's true. After the Holocaust, a lot of Orthodox and religion Jews simply left monotheism, left religion. Why? Because they said, if God can make no mistakes, how could he possibly do this? But, and that is exactly what led them to thinking, well, probably God does not exist, and led them to live religion. Why is it so important? Look, most religions are based on laws written thousands and thousands of years ago. And all of them, people following the laws without the ability of changing these laws. They are written, and this is what you should follow. This prevents us from moving forward with morality decisions. This prevents us from changing as a society. For example, what are the things that I'm talking about? I'm talking about more liberalism in terms of gender equality. I'm talking about gay marriages and etc. Before I continue, let's take a POI from the second house.
Yes. There are a lot of reasons to move out of religion, whether it's that it's more difficult to live in a religion. Why do you think that your reason is so important?
Look, yes, there are a lot of reasons not to believe in God. If you can mute yourself, great. There are also a lot of reasons to do believe in God. We believe that there is a trade-off. The more reasons we bring for people not to believe in God, so the more people who are self-thinking, the more people who make their mind by themselves, or make researchers to decide what they think of, and do not base their opinions and base their rules based on something that is so old that is simply immoral for today. So I want to add a little bit about imbalance. No, you know what? Let's take first half. Do you have a POI? All right, no PY, no time.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Engage with the idea that aren't you more likely to think religion is fake when God is perceived as perfect, but they do not save you in times of difficulty?
I'm not sure I understood the POI, but here, look, the difference between Inbal's speech and my speech is that we talk about different people. Inbal's speech mainly addresses the weak people, mainly addresses the poorest, the people who has no education, the people who will probably not develop rational thinking by themselves. For these people, what Inbal provides you are mechanisms in which they still has something to hold on to. For example, if we go back to my example about the Holocaust, these poorest people, these people that do stay religious, they need God to hold on to. They need something to anchor themselves. And this is what Inbal provides you. What I talked about in my speech is the people who are already on the fence, the people who can change their minds. And I explained why specifically these people are probably going to leave religion, therefore give us more free thinking, more liberalism, and more social changes. For all these reasons, we are proud to oppose.
Thank you for this very fine speech. And now to extend the debate on the government side, I invite the member of the government. Here.
Just give me a second. I think I dropped a page. Okay. Okay. Ready? 3, 2, 1. The problem with the opening half is that all of their cases are based on how people can rationalize when they think about this thought about the place, about how God is fallible or infallible, and how they can apply it in the places where they are hurt when they lost their children. The problem, and why it probably doesn't stand, for instance, from the opening opposition telling us that it will give you conciliation when your child dies, is that people don't think rationally in these cases. They don't think about how this narrative applies to them right now and how they can get better in the future. Rather, they think emotionally. You're biologically hurt when your family member dies because you loved him so much and you develop such great emotion to him. You still suffer tremendously, even if you want to rationalize that there is hope in the future. You're unable to because your emotions in flux. You're in flux with emotion and are unable to act. Right? You can't actually control your decisions because you have so strong sentiments in your body to just stay at home and not do anything every day. Even if you can rationalize about that, like the opposition tell you, it's not going to change anything about your emotions and your behavior. Their case is simply out of the debate. It's probably true about other cases that we got from the opening government. The other rebuttal I want to make to opening opposition is that people will be more likely to leave religion on their side of the house. Firstly, people are unlikely to leave religion because in a lot of religions you lose your family and you lose your community at a point where it is a particularly strong religion. We think we're better off actually changing the religion in this community, which is what we're going to bring to an extension. But secondly, I think it's symmetrical. If God made a mistake, then I think you'll want to leave the religion because it's a bad religion because God made a mistake while making it, right? I don't see why you will want to do that and how people can leave the religion. Our extension is specifically going to have an impact on how you actually change bad religions today for the better. How you do unlock them for LGBTQ community. How you do unlock equality between men and women in the religion. And how you unlock it for the vast majority of people who live under the religion in the world. So okay, let's begin. A, what's wrong with today's religions? Firstly, they don't accept LGBTQ communities, right? It's written in the Bible that it's wrong. You're not allowed to do that, right? They push you to do conversion therapy. They don't accept you if you're gay. Then Orthodox Jews in Israel literally throw you out of your family, put you on the street, right? You must comply with all of the laws there, right? If we look at like Islamic countries that have Sharia law in them, then women are punished by death for adultery. Then people are suffering for from all of the bad laws that are put in religion. People cannot live that religion because at the point where they live, then the family don't accept them anymore. It's such an important, all of their community is what will push them aside, right? But it's also, they don't know the outside world because they have been raised in such religion which is so powerful on them, and they are scared, right? These are also the people that are, the religion is likely to have the most amount of influence of them. Because if you get people that is like maybe somewhat believing in God but is not very religious, then it's unlikely to think and rationalize about these narratives anyway. It's not that an important piece of his life. The debate is probably most relevant about the people who are extremely religious, right? Today they are locked out in religion. Why cannot you change that on op side of the house? A couple of things. Firstly, because religious texts are usually binding and are very, very clear on what they say. In the Bible, there is literally a sentence called Asur Mishkav Zachar, which translates to English says, "Thou shalt not sleep with men," which is very clear that you are not allowed to sleep with the same sex, right? There is no room for interpretation there. You can try to interpret it differently, but it's so clear on what you are not allowed to do and how you cannot change it, right? The Quran and Sharia law are clearly stating that women's testimony are worth half of that of a man. There is no room for interpretation there if that's what applies to them. And you cannot say that this is different. So as long as you are in the religion, you have to follow the texts that are in the Bible. Secondly, because religious leaders have so much power and influence you, right? They represent God, right? You cannot challenge God because God is infallible, right? He's always on, and he probably pick them, right? They control your education. You consult them with everything in your life, which is why you are so less likely to change. How then do you change it on government side? This is particular where extension is the most important. A couple of things to note here. Firstly, on our side of the house, biblical texts are not set in stone. Why? Because if you rationally think about it, when people think about the biblical text and know what they mean, then this is the time when you actually rationally think about what God is infallible. Therefore, he could make mistakes. Therefore, the text that he did write in the Bible must not be, might not be correct, right? You can claim that they are outdated. Maybe he wrote them back when society was different and the laws were different and the laws should have been different. He didn't know about technological progress. Maybe he's not omnipotent. He doesn't know about the future. He didn't know how societal values are going to change. Maybe therefore the rules that he makes are no longer applicable for today. This is the point where you can break that cycle. Secondly, priests and leaders of your religion can also be wrong. How does this look like, right? Because firstly, they're at the point where you perceive them to be chosen by God, then at the point where God can be wrong, where God is infallible, you can change that, right? They have chosen them wrongly, but also which means that they might be wrong. Secondly, because they were created by him, he's not perfect, so aren't they? They mean that they can be wrong. Before I continue, I'll take opening opposition.
Look, if you want to change religion for good, you must analyze specifically why the things that you're talking about, like gay rights, are likely to be the ones to precede.
That's exactly what I'm doing now. Okay, cool. They are created by him, right? They can be criticized at this point where they are not infallible because they might be wrong. You don't have to listen to them if they tell you something that you don't really like because they are not God, right? It's not that just people feel that they can criticize them. It's that they themselves think of themselves as wrong because they are very much into the religion and they know that the religious interpretation is that God is infallible, therefore is fallible, therefore so can be. Also because other religious leaders can bring up the subject and they can debate with each other on the stuff whether God was right on this point, which is exactly the point where you're likely to be likely to change your mind because other religious figures are also powerful, right? But why are these specifically the narratives that are going to be influenced? Because these are specifically that society pushes the narratives on influence through the internet, through societal change, that people tell you that gay people can be accepted, that these laws are no longer acceptable. Religious people actually do get to see them. They do not always live in such a bubble, which is why they constantly try to push them away. We tell you that when these narratives are also influence them, then these are the narratives that are likely to promote from within the religion. And this is how you get change on our side of the house. You never get that change out of them. What are the crucial impacts of this? Firstly, religions can change. People can allow to change or no. You can now accept people who are gay in religion. People don't have to be feel locked out that if they want, their family will kick them out. Even if you don't completely change your religion, people just accept that maybe they are wrong, maybe they could be different. Maybe your family still doesn't think you're right, but it doesn't mean that they are going to kick you out because they realize that their religion is going to be wrong. This is the point where you can be yourself. You're not locked out. So proud. For all of these reasons, we are so proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very fine speech. And now I invite the member of the opposition to introduce the last team into the debate. Here.
Okay. Okay, I'm setting my notes. Okay. Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to start by rebutting like the idea of religious manipulation in LGBTQ people, because like it's present both in OG and CJ. First, I want to make something clear, right? Believing that God is infallible does not equate to accepting what religious figure says, right? This is the first thing, because we think that we can believe that there is an infallible truth out there. There is an objective truth, infallible truth, like there is an infallible truth out there, but still disagree with how people interpret that infallible God which is out there. We think this is something which still happens. And then we get more into this in this debate, because like there is things which cannot change on either house of this debate, and there is one specific thing which can only change on this debate. And I'm going to say why is that thing that we have to change, because we think that when it comes to interpretation of the truth, the godly truth, we think we don't have change. Like even if you say that there is a fallible God, we think there will be competing interpretations of when was God true and when was God wrong, because he clearly said that there are verses in the Bible which says that a man should not lay next to another man, but there are verses in the Bible which also say that you have to love anyone no matter what. Jesus, I love you, and I commend you that the first commandment is about love and is about unconditional love, right? So we think that then when we have a fallible God, there are going to be this different competing interpretation of knowing when was God right, when was God wrong. We think that when we believe that we can still have that verse right, but already we believe that unconditional love is the biggest law. We think we can already go behind that. When we think there is a fallible God, then people are going to say, oh, probably Jesus was wrong when he said you have to love anyone unconditionally. We think that already, even when we believe that there is a fallible God, there are people who have the most influence in our societies are going to create the most understanding of how we have to believe in God. Ultimately, that harm does not live just because we believe in a fallible God, right? Cool. Let me tell you one thing. Like this debate can happen on many layers, right? It can happen on a layer of a Western individual who goes to church once in a while, consider themselves, but do not consider themselves particularly spiritual, like people like us. On the second layer, it can happen on people who live in communities like Sub-Sahara, where there is corrupted system, where there is a risk of child mortality is high, where people die from hunger, where there are civil conflicts, which can happen anytime, where people lost their entire families in previous wars and want to get closure. Right? It can happen on like people from the Middle East where wars have no hope to end. Why do we think these are the most important groups in this debate? Because people who literally live in broken societies and there is no hope that they can be amended in a single lifetime. It means that even if the entire UN goes back the Middle East, there is no hope that the Middle East is going to be in peace. Even if like whatever happens, there is no hope that I'm going to get back my entire family which was lost. So we think that these people who need religion the most, they are the most important stakeholder in this debate because they are the most vulnerable and their conditions cannot be changed in this lifetime. We are going to give the analysis on the parameters which was set by the opening and show how we win even with their parameters. They say people generally believe in God for two reasons: emotional safety net and the guidance of their behaviors, right? Okay, let's analyze these two things, right? Given the conditions, the situation, the picture that I painted, people live in broken societies and which none of the teams in this, none of the sides in this debate can amend in a single lifetime. These people literally lost hope in the way the world functioned. The only result they go to, the only option they have is to believe in a God which creates meaning and which makes them able to create coherent identities, which makes them be able to believe in a future self, in heaven, in an afterlife, because there is nothing which they can say from this world. When we start questioning if God is either fallible or infallible, then it destabilizes the entire faith system, because now they don't know if God was right when he said that if you do the right thing, I'm going to take you to heaven. These people can think that even if I get everything right, God can still make a mistake and send me to hell. These people have no incentive to actually maintain the psychological harmony which they're able to acquire when they believe that there is an infallible God, that even if this world is so shit, that at least they have an afterlife. But second, in terms of social order, right, we have seen how in this broken society, how religion is very fundamental in building communities through forgiveness and unity. For example, because we already know that Jesus has been preaching forgiveness and unity, and people want to go to heaven, we have seen that, for example, in Rwanda after genocide, the religion was used as an instrument to preach forgiveness and unity. When we have because people tend to capitalize on religion to advance their political values. When you have a group which wants to do revenge, for example, and it says that Jesus was wrong by preaching forgiveness, go and kill your other people, it's going to create a cycle of revenge already, because these people are already vulnerable, they're already hopeless, and they want to do whatever interpretation is prevailing in society. But also second, we see that it is a deterring of crimes that can happen anytime as emotions are running high. Why is this true? Because already people want to have an afterlife because they lost hope in everything. And people know that in order to have an afterlife, you have to do these specific things. You have to obey to the commands which was stated. When you understand that a mistake can happen anytime and it's an irreversible mistake, you do not have an incentive to act according to what the Bible says or the Quran says, because you don't have faith in that deity system which can like fail you anytime. We also think that ultimately people have more despair, like, because even if I get everything right, God can still fail me, right? So ladies and gentlemen, in this debate, we think that there are going to be competing interpretation. We think it is very disturbing not knowing when God was right, when God was wrong. There are going to be competing interpretation. But on our side of the house, even if we have bigoted people, when we think that there is ultimately an infallible God, we can keep challenging those interpretations and aim to reach a point where we believe that infallible God is willing us to reach to. But when there are different interpretations, and I as a follower, I'm not able to know exactly specifically when God was right, when God was wrong, then it creates a whole disruption and instability of my faith system. We already told you that it is impossible to change the condition of these stakeholders that are presented. These are the people that we have to care more about. These are the people that we have to protect in this debate. This is the only thing that changed in this debate. All other things can still exist on both sides of the house. For that analysis, please vote the CO.
Thank you very much for this very fine speech. And now I invite the government whip to continue the debate for the government side.
Do you hear me? I was told they have like background noises.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on my side or...
No. We can.
No, it's my side. My computer is starting to die. What can I do?
I mean, we can hear you still. It's a little bit like there is some background noise, but I can hear you and understand you. If everyone else can also understand you, I think it's all right.
Let me try this.
When you're closer to the computer, so I think it's better.
When I'm closer to the computer.
I think.
Okay, I think like now I can hear myself well.
Yeah,
okay.
This is fine.
Bedtime for this. Okay. So let me just open it up. Two clashes in this debate. Where do you get a better emotional safety net or something like that? And B, where can you criticize religion more, and where can you like live with it better? Before I will go into the clashes, I will rebut some of the things we got there from home. Firstly, they say to us, look, but there are existing different narratives within the Bible itself. There is like, you shall love everyone, love their neighbor, and you shall not sleep with men. But when God is infallible, you try to make both things work. So what's like the thing that most religious person do? Okay, you shall love everyone besides the gay people. I think this is a way, like when you have something that is more specific, then it is definitely true. It's harder to misinterpret it. I think that even if like not from this example, there are a lot of examples in religious texts as to texts that are harder to tell otherwise. Now, the second thing I want to tell you, and it will be relevant in the cases as well, that when God can have mistakes, also religious authority can make mistakes, right? If in today's world, let's say a big rabbi tells something, for the smaller rabbis, this something is automatically true because the bigger rabbis is closer to God. I think like if the Pope says something, the Pope is right. On our world, since even God can make mistakes, definitely religious leaders can make mistakes, and it gives a lot more room for the local imams to put a more liberal, I don't know, verdicts. Okay, the second thing that they tell us is now we won't believe in heaven. We now believe that God can make a mistake and send me to hell. No, first thing I want to say to it, but is it likely that God will make a mistake on something so important? And if I was like a good person, why would God make a mistake? I think that if people will think about it rationally, they will think that this is important enough, or they will want to believe that this is important enough for God won't make the mistakes about them. Second thing, people like to be optimistic, right? Even if God can have the mistakes about some people, about me, he won't, because I prefer this thinking. And third thing, they look for a meaning. This is why they will still believe in the religion. I don't, and still follow and try to be like a good person. I think there are more, the probability of going to heaven if you are a good person is higher on either side of the house. It's higher like on ours. It's higher if you are a good person than you're a good person on either side, yes. And lastly, they say you believe there is no heaven. They believe that God can have mistakes. They don't believe that God is a liar, right? You believe that heaven exists, probably. Okay, so the clashes. On the first clash, where we have the emotional safety net, OG can tell you feel more sure of yourself because you have less pressure, and a lot of the guilt goes to God's own mistakes and stuff like that. First opposition can tell, look, in our world, God is stronger, and this is why we feel safer. I don't know. This clash is a wash. Why is it a wash? Because Yuval's rebuttal was very effective on this clash, and B, I will come after. I will explain like the other clash why it's way more important. It's a wash because also you have like reasons for both sides, and I don't think that any side is like more convincing than the other. It probably affects some people not. I don't know. Okay, so on the second clash, where do you get to criticize more? We are the only team that actually brought material on. Now, why is it so important? Because as we say, there are people today that live in a situation where they can't go out, right? Even if they stop believing that, they live inside a religious community that doesn't have, they don't give them the option to go out. If they will leave, their family and their friends will like stop being family and friends for them, and they will suffer tremendously because of it. It means that they live in constant dissonance to the point that their life is actually suffer, right? If somebody is gay and everywhere around you hears you cannot be gay, if you're gay, you should be scolded to death. I think scolded is like when you throw rocks at you. Then these person's lives are actually hell on earth. Now, why? So because that, if you get to criticize the religion more, and this person can feel better about himself, he can logic with with his parents, with his friends, say, look, but God maybe made a mistakes here. This is the way that you should interpret this Bible. When the religious leaders are not so strong, you can actually criticize the religious leaders as well. Now, notice that when you can criticize them, you will get probably local imams or stuff like that putting a more liberal verdicts. Now, even if it's not your local imam, you can come to other people and tell them, look, this imam is in my opinion. You can there is logic on my side, and because of that, it can make their life incredibly better. Now, why is clash so much more important than other clashes? For the other clashes, you have other mechanisms to achieve this kind of behavior. You have your family and your friends that can give you like the safety net that you look.
Chance?
Yes, I will take you.
The people we are talking about are way more liberal than the conservative religious people that made this.
Okay, thank you. I will speak about it in a second. I think these people have so much more reasons to go out of the religion. I don't think that your mechanism is unique in that way. Continuing. So there are other mechanisms to achieve this kind of safety net, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's your past achievements that you can rely on and get solace from it, whether it's just optimism. Secondly, the effect in their side is not so large, right? If somebody thinks about its life a lot or a little bit less, or somebody feels that the shitty situation where he's in is because God made a mistake, or there is a secret reason that he doesn't know, it doesn't change its life so much. On our side, we actually showed a tremendous impact on these people that can go into depression, people that are life are actually worse on our side, and we show why it can be better. Third thing, on their side, people can just like stop believing, and it mitigates a lot of the damages that they showed us, both things. And lastly, as Morad told you, God is benevolent on both sides, meaning you're likely to think that God loves you, just like the society doesn't love you. Because of all these reasons, I call you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fine speech. And for the last speech of the debate, I invite the opposition whip. Here.
Yeah, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, dear panel, today my burden is to continue rebuttaling some of the points of the other side and then tell you why we ultimately win this debate. But firstly, let me go a bit more into what OG said. OG says about talks about how people feel inferior towards God, and but these are probably privileged Western individuals who want to dominate everything, but a person in more doesn't give a shit about how superior or inferior they feel. But moreover, let's talk about how they talked about how, you know, when your God is infallible, you are less stressed and less anxious of making mistakes, because you know that also your God is making mistakes. We don't see that that's quite the case here, because you also can have the case where you actually believe that your God is the one who is all forgiving and he is still infallible. So we think that stress or that anxiety they get from making the mistakes is quickly cured, or the remedy for it can be quickly found just by simply believing what many people and many religious beliefs and reiterate all the time, that God is all forgiving regardless of the sins that you do, regardless if you go and engage into sexual intercourse with another man, God is still there to forgive you, and the God loves your forgiveness. Also, they've talked about, I actually didn't understand how on their side of the house, from OG, we got that people are more likely going to follow the religion when they know that their God is sorry for that, that their God is infallible. Because when you actually see you're adhering to a text, your Bible or the Quran, but you know that this Bible or the Quran is written by someone who can commit mistakes, what incentive, how much are you encouraged to actually follow what's written there when you know that it can actually be a mistake? So why the fuck would I even bother following it when I can simply, I'm following something that's actually, it's a mistake, but I wasn't supposed to even follow. Like, why would I even spend my time doing that? Okay, let's go back also to CG. Like, think of, because CG has almost a similar case of how religion can change, and we can change perception on different minorities such as LGBTQ and everything like that. So when you give that chance that the religion can change, which is true on their side of the house, but think of how much it undermines and how much people will keep adhering to what the Bible is saying or the Quran is saying. As I've just said, people will not just have that encouragement of following these books because they simply know they have committed a mistake. So why the fuck am I even following this one? So on their side of the house, they built this dangerous world for religion and religious people, whereby they are simply not incentivized to keep following to the religion at all, but just resort to their interpretation and so on and so forth. Before I go, OG.
Note that people are still likely to follow the Bible because they know that the Bible won't say heinously wrong stuff. For example, killing is good.
Yes, I don't know. I still don't know. If you didn't get it till now, I still don't understand how will I still follow the Bible when I know that the Bible can have mistakes, or most of the Bible might have mistakes. Like, why would I follow mistakes? I don't understand that. Anyways, so let's go to our case. So Chris talked to you about how those people who have been in, like, who just feel bad, like who feel vulnerable in the world, and who just need this higher power to believe in, and higher power to higher power to believe in, and higher power to adhere to, and this higher power that they strongly need in their daily life. So think of it, what does an infallible God does to you when this God someone can do something bad to you, but you're not able to forgive him, just because you're not being able to forgive him, because at the end of the day, you're not sure if your God on your side of the world is actually going to make an accurate judgment on what you're saying. Because if we read the end of slide, the God is vulnerable to mistakes, such as on their judgment on any kind of mistake. So their mistakes, the mistakes are not limited. So the idea that you have this this God that can simply judge someone who has hurted you significantly bad, or who just broke your heart, judge them in a wrong way, and you don't get what you're promised to at the end of the day, then we don't see how the world is built for those people. But also, how can you use, how Chris talked about when you build up communities, and how you can have this incentive and to misuse this interpretation when you think that God is infallible. Okay, so let's go for a world when God is infallible, and I'm trying to win a point or win a case, but I'm using religion to do that, or I'm trying just to justify an act, and I'm trying to use religion because of that. Then I can just say, listen, I think this part of the Bible, it's wrong, because it simply doesn't fit what I'm trying to do. Like, it simply doesn't fit my end. So why would I even follow it? Like, I can simply justify my own bad acts just by saying that, oh, God made a mistake here, but listen, I'm just doing something normal, something fine, but it's just God who made the mistake. This significantly harms the social order, because it gives people the incentive to engage into negative acts. CG, I'm sorry, I don't have time. Or I'll take you quickly.
You realize that there is still law and order, right? Because there is police. People are not going to
Yes,
commit crime because it's in the Bible.
Okay, thank you. Well, so yes, you have law and order. Probably you're not going to go and kill someone, okay, because you have law and order there. But is it going to stop you from breaking someone's heart? Because you're not, by law, you're not going to be judged by breaking your girlfriend's heart. Or is it going to judge you by breaking your mom's heart? Is it going to judge you by just not helping someone who is poor in the street? You just see them and you turn your head on the other way. This is fine by law. No one's going to judge you by law. But by religion, you're judged when you don't have someone who's vulnerable in the community. But you no longer have the incentive, because you will say, oh, God made a mistake there, I don't actually need to help the poor people. So on the basis of on that line, and how do we win the debate today, is that we've shown you how there are people who still need to believe in infallible God, because they will calm down when they know that at the end of the day, when they are harmed, they will get the other person, they can get the revenge, or they will be rewarded by their God, but not just think, oh, what's the purpose of what I'm doing, when at the end of the day, God can simply judge me on the wrong way. We've shown you how this actually provides an incentive for people to just act on a social, on a bigger impact, on a bigger community impact, how they can act as they please, actually harm the other people, and just justify their acts on the basis of where God has committed a mistake on their competing interpretation between people. And because of those reasons, I strongly do believe that we win all over the teams, and I proudly oppose this motion. And thank you very much for Astana. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you very much to the